worked for Elvis Presley for 18 years?
Well, I've been at Graceland 25 years, but I worked for him 14.
The iron gates of Graceland closed to the public at midnight, but behind the heavy curtains upstairs, a completely different world was waking up. A trusted housekeeper just broke a 40-year silence about what she found in the master dressing room during those final, chaotic months. It changes everything we think we know about the king's final days, and the family has been trying to bury this logbook for decades. What's the new discovery? Let's dig together. The Midnight Logbook. An old leather-bound notebook sits on a wooden table. The spine is cracked. The edges are frayed by decades of handling. Inside, rows of neat handwriting track every single arrival and departure from the mansion during the spring of 1977. This is not an official diary. The estate executors did not approve it. It was kept secretly by a senior housekeeper who saw the inner circle shifting day by day. For 40 years, this notebook remained hidden in an old footlocker at the bottom of a basement closet. The woman who wrote these entries refused every interview request. She turned down cash offers from tabloid reporters. She turned down publishers. But recently, a family legal dispute forced a cache of old papers into the open. The logbook was among them. The very first entry from March of that final year challenges the official biography. The public was told the star spent that spring resting in isolation. They were told he was preparing for an upcoming national tour. The logbook tells a completely different story. It shows the front gate security guards were ordered to turn off their flashlights at 2 o'clock in the morning. A dark sedan arrived almost every evening during that 3-week block. No names were written down for the driver. Instead, the housekeeper simply noted the vehicle license plate number. That license plate belonged to a private medical specialist from out of state. He was not part of the regular Memphis medical loop. He was a specialist in neurological decline. The doctor never entered through the front door. He used the side kitchen entrance, walking past the quiet industrial refrigerators while the rest of the house slept. The housekeeper watched him from the pantry window. The secret midnight visits create a massive problem for the official estate narrative. If the singer was simply exhausted, he did not need an out-of-state brain specialist arriving under the cover of total darkness. Tension inside the house was building rapidly during these weeks. The logbook details small, strange changes in the daily routine. The staff was suddenly forbidden from entering the second floor after 8 o'clock in the evening. This was a complete break from decades of tradition. Usually, the kitchen staff brought up trays of food at all hours of the night. Now, a new protocol took over. Trays were left on a small wooden table right at the base of the stairs. A member of the inner security team carried them up the rest of the way. The housekeeper noticed something strange about the trays when they returned to the kitchen the next morning. The food was rarely touched. Instead, the small glasses of water were always completely empty. The physical evidence points to a massive domestic cover-up happening months before the final tragedy. The singer was not simply resting upstairs. He was being managed. Someone was controlling who saw him, who spoke to him, and what information left the building. The housekeeper wrote down a specific conversation she overheard near the downstairs telephone line. A senior family member was arguing with a booking agent. The agent wanted to cancel the upcoming tour dates due to health concerns. The family member refused. They insisted the shows must go on, no matter what. This brings us to a major question that the estate has never answered. Who was truly running the mansion during those final months? Was it the man whose name was on the front gate? Or was it a small group of handlers who needed him to keep performing? The logbook points directly to a quiet coup inside the house. The housekeeper notes that on April 12th, 3 longtime security guards were abruptly dismissed. These were men who had been with the family for over 10 years. They knew the singer's habits. They knew his vulnerabilities. They were replaced by 3 new individuals hired by an outside corporate entity. The singer himself did not sign the employment contracts for the new guards. The signature on the bottom of the paperwork belonged to his father, who was increasingly under the influence of business managers. The new guards did not report to the family. They reported directly to the corporate office in California. The environment inside the mansion instantly shifted from a chaotic family home to a cold, restricted compound. The housekeeper wrote that the singer seemed like a visitor in his own house. He stopped coming downstairs entirely. Then, a bizarre incident occurred on the night of May 4th. The housekeeper was cleaning the lower office when she heard shouting from the master bedroom upstairs. It was the singer's voice. He was demanding to see his personal lawyer. He wanted to change his will. He wanted to remove certain individuals from his estate entirely. The argument lasted for over 2 hours. The logbook records that the California managers arrived at the house less than an hour later. They did not call an ambulance. They did not call a doctor. They brought a notary public with them at 4 o'clock in the morning. The next day, the singer's personal lawyer arrived at the mansion, but the new guards blocked him at the gate. They told him the singer was too ill to receive visitors. The lawyer left a letter at the guard shack demanding an immediate meeting. That letter never made it to the second floor. The housekeeper found it torn to pieces in the kitchen trash can later that afternoon. She pieced the pages back together and hid them inside her logbook. The letter explicitly warned the family that the new corporate arrangements were highly illegal. It stated that the singer was being signed into contracts he had never actually seen. The legal threat was real, but it was quietly neutralized within 48 hours. The estate records show the lawyer was suddenly paid a massive settlement fee from a secondary corporate account. He resigned from his position the next day, citing personal health reasons. He never spoke about the mansion again. The housekeeper's logbook proves the inner circle was systematically cutting off every single person who could protect the singer from financial exploitation. He was completely isolated at the top of the stairs, surrounded only by people who profited from his performances. But the isolation was about to produce an unexpected crisis. On the morning of June 1st, the housekeeper went upstairs against orders to deliver fresh linens. The door to the master dressing room was unlocked. She pushed it open and found the singer sitting alone on the floor, surrounded by old financial ledgers. He was holding a black telephone receiver, trying to dial an outside line. But the line was completely dead. The corporate managers had quietly cut the direct wires to the master suite. The singer looked up at the housekeeper. He did not yell at her for breaking the rules. He looked terrified. He asked her a single question that reveals the true horror of his final days. He asked if the public still knew he was alive. Behind the white pillars, the kitchen at Graceland smelled of fried bacon and stale coffee at 4 in the afternoon. That was the hour the house usually began to move. The mansion required a staff of over a dozen people to run smoothly, yet by July of 1977, the domestic staff operated in total silence. The housekeeper noted in her logbook that the usual laughter and loud music from the ground floor had completely vanished. The atmosphere resembled a courthouse rather than a rock star's home. The primary source of this tension was a quiet but fierce battle over access. The singer's father, Vernon, sat in his small outbuilding office near the back of the property. He was a man in failing health, overwhelmed by the soaring costs of maintaining the estate. The corporate managers from California used Vernon's financial anxiety to widen the gap between the singer and his oldest friends. They convinced the aging father that the old Memphis inner circle was bleeding the estate dry. A specific incident on July 10th illustrates this shifting power dynamic. 2 of the singer's former bandmates arrived at the front gate on their motorcycles. They had noticed the singer looked visibly disoriented during his recent short tour dates. They wanted to speak to him directly, friend to friend, away from the management team. The gate guard did not use the intercom to call the main house. Instead, he made a direct call to the manager's hotel suite downtown. The manager's instruction was immediate. The guard told the musicians that the singer was sleeping and could not be disturbed. The housekeeper, who was cleaning the front parlor near the entrance, watched through the window as the 2 men were turned away. She knew for a fact that the singer was not asleep. Just 10 minutes earlier, he had asked a maid to bring a fresh pack of cigarettes to his upstairs study. He was waiting for his friends to arrive, entirely unaware that they were being barred at the perimeter. The isolation strategy was highly deliberate. By controlling the flow of people into the house, the management team could control the narrative surrounding the singer's physical state. They needed him to appear functional enough to satisfy the insurance companies backing the upcoming August tour. If his closest friends saw how weak he actually was, they might call an independent doctor or go to the local press. The corporate entity could not risk losing the multi-million-dollar tour revenue. The logbook reveals that the internal management team began tracking the staff's loyalty. The housekeeper found a small, typed list in the butler's pantry on July 15th. It contained the names of every domestic worker, along with notes about their behavior. Next to her own name, someone had written the word observant. Next to a younger maid's name, the word talkative was highlighted in red ink. The maid was dismissed from her duties 3 days later, officially for a minor scheduling error. The empty rooms on the ground floor became a physical barrier. The singer stayed confined to his suite, while the corporate handlers occupied the offices downstairs. The family dynamic had completely fractured. The singer's stepbrothers, who once had free run of the property, found themselves restricted to the lower pool room. They were required to request permission from the security team before going upstairs to see their own brother. Tension boiled over during a family dinner on July 22nd. The singer did not attend, but his father and several cousins were present in the formal dining room. The housekeeper was serving the meal when an argument broke out regarding the estate's cash flow. One cousin openly questioned why a prominent Beverly Hills financial firm had been granted power of attorney over the singer's secondary bank accounts. The question was met with absolute silence from Vernon, who simply stared at his plate. The financial firm had quietly taken control of the singer's liquid assets weeks prior. The housekeeper's logbook confirms that a courier delivered 3 large boxes of financial files from the mansion to a waiting limousine that very evening. The singer did not sign the authorization for the transfer. The management team used a pre-signed rubber stamp to authorize the removal of the documents. This raises the central question of the entire final month. If the singer was too weak or too distracted to sign his own legal documents, who was verifying his consent? The staff knew the truth. They saw the rubber stamp sitting on the desk in the lower office. They saw the managers using it on contracts, checks, and release forms, while the man himself sat alone in the dark upstairs. Whispers in the dressing room. The master dressing room at the top of the stairs was lined with black lacquered cabinets and floor-to-ceiling mirrors. It was a space designed for public preparation, but by the first week of August, it had become a medical staging ground. The thick carpet muffled the footsteps of the very few people permitted inside. The housekeeper, entering under the strict supervision of a guard to change the wastebaskets, noticed the strong smell of rubbing alcohol and industrial disinfectant masking the usual scent of expensive cologne. On August 3rd, a highly specific confrontation took place inside this room. The housekeeper was tucked away in the adjacent wardrobe closet, folding stage capes, when the singer's primary Memphis physician entered. He was joined by one of the new corporate handlers from the California firm. The doctor looked visibly shaken, holding a clipboard containing recent lab results. The housekeeper stood completely still behind the hanging suits, listening to every word. The doctor stated plainly that the upcoming tour must be postponed. He used the word catastrophic to describe what would happen if the singer was subjected to the stress of travel and 3-hour performances under heavy stage lights. He pointed out that the singer's blood pressure was dangerously high, and his liver function was failing rapidly. The physical toll of the previous months of constant performance had pushed his body to an absolute breaking point. The response from the corporate handler was cold and entirely transactional. He did not ask about alternative treatments. He did not express concern for the man's survival. Instead, he pulled a pocket ledger from his jacket and read off a series of figures representing the financial penalties for canceling the stadium dates. The firm stood to lose over $4 million in non-refundable ticket sales, venue rentals, and merchandising contracts. The handler looked the doctor in the eye and told him that a cancellation was simply not an option. The doctor argued back, his voice rising slightly before he checked himself. He reminded the handler that an independent medical board would investigate if anything went wrong on the road. The handler smiled faintly. He informed the doctor that a secondary medical opinion had already been secured from a clinic in Las Vegas. This secondary doctor, who had never even examined the singer in person, had signed a health clearance certificate 48 hours earlier in exchange for a retainer fee. This brings us to the core mystery of that final fortnight. The secret trip taken under an assumed name. The housekeeper's logbook records that on the night of August 6th, the singer was quietly moved out of the house through the basement tunnel that led to the carport. He was placed into the back of an unmarked van. He was registered at a small private clinic outside of Nashville under the name John Carpenter. The public was told he was spending the weekend at a private resort to relax before the tour. In reality, he spent 72 hours attached to an intravenous drip, receiving massive doses of experimental stabilizers designed to temporarily mask his physical decline. The housekeeper found the clinic baggage tags hidden inside a velvet jewelry box 2 days later. The tags were dated August 9th, just 1 week before his death. The Nashville clinic trip was a desperate attempt to patch up a failing investment. The singer was no longer viewed as a human being by his management team. He was a corporate asset that needed to remain functional until the end of the fiscal quarter. When he returned to the mansion on the evening of August 9th, the staff was shocked by his appearance. He required the assistance of 2 men just to navigate the short walk from the carport to the elevator. His skin looked gray under the harsh fluorescent lights of the rear hallway. Yet, despite his profound physical weakness, the singer made one final attempt to break free from his handlers. The housekeeper noted that on August 11th, he used a secondary, forgotten service telephone located in the basement laundry room. He managed to dial the private number of his former wife. The conversation lasted less than 4 minutes before the line was abruptly cut by the main switchboard in the security office. The housekeeper was sorting towels just 3 feet away from the laundry phone. She heard the singer beg his former wife to send an independent lawyer to the house. He explicitly stated that he was being forced to sign papers he could not read. Before she could answer, the line went completely dead. The singer stared at the receiver for a moment, dropped it onto the concrete floor, and walked back toward the elevator without saying a word to the staff. He knew he was completely trapped inside his own kingdom. The receipts in the attic. The storage space above the executive offices was accessible only by a steep, folding wooden ladder. It was a hot, dusty loft that smelled of old cardboard and rotting glue. This attic held the financial overflow of the entire estate, the thousands of invoices, receipts, and canceled checks that the ground floor accountants no longer needed for daily operations. It was here, on the afternoon of August 12th, that the housekeeper found the definitive proof of the corporate betrayal. She had been sent up to the attic to find an old box of promotional photographs from 1972. The management team needed them for a new European merchandising push. While searching behind a stack of broken stage monitors, her foot struck a heavy metal filing box. Unlike the other containers in the attic, this box was locked with a heavy brass padlock. The label on the front simply read, "Special Projects Confidential." The housekeeper knew where the keys were kept. The estate manager regularly left his master key ring on the hook inside the butler's pantry during his afternoon golf games. She waited until the lower office was completely empty at 3 o'clock. She retrieved the keys, returned to the attic, and unlocked the metal box. Inside, she found a series of white bank ledgers that had been completely omitted from the official estate audits. The ledger entries from June and July of 1977 revealed a massive, systematic drainage of the singer's primary personal account. This was the account used to pay the daily operating costs of the mansion, the salaries of the domestic staff, and the medical bills. According to the documents, over $800,000 had been transferred out of this account in a single 3-week period. The money had not been spent on the estate. The receipts showed the funds were transferred to a dummy corporation registered in the Cayman Islands under the name Archway Holdings. The individual who authorized every single one of these transfers was not the singer. It was the lead corporate manager from the California firm. He had used the pre-signed rubber stamp to validate the bank authorization letters. The housekeeper took her notebook and meticulously copied the exact transaction numbers, dates, and dollar amounts. She knew that if she were caught with these files, she would be fired instantly, or worse. The tension in the house was already so thick that the staff suspected the corporate security guards were going through their personal belongings in the locker room. The receipts in the attic solved a mystery that had been puzzling the domestic staff for months. Throughout that summer, local Memphis merchants had begun refusing to deliver goods to the mansion on credit. The butcher, the pharmacy, and the fuel company had all demanded immediate cash payments upon delivery. The staff had been baffled by this. The singer was selling out arenas across the country, yet his own kitchen was struggling to get fresh meat delivered because the bills were 60 days overdue. The money from the ticket sales was never making it back to Memphis. It was being intercepted at the corporate level in California, funneled through the Cayman Islands account, and distributed to executive bonuses before the singer's local accounts could be funded. The manager was actively starving the estate of cash while publicizing the upcoming tour as a massive financial success. The housekeeper found one specific receipt that proved the betrayal went far deeper than simple embezzlement. It was an invoice from a private investigation firm based in Los Angeles, dated July 24th. The invoice details showed that the corporate handlers had paid $30,000 to have the singer's own family members put under 24-hour surveillance. The private investigators had tapped the phone lines at Vernon's back office trailer. They had tracked the movements of the singer's girlfriend, and they had compiled detailed dossiers on the financial vulnerabilities of every cousin working on the property. The management team wanted to know exactly who might try to interfere with their control of the singer. They were looking for leverage to keep the family quiet. The most damning piece of paper in the box was a typed memo marked for executive eyes only. It was dated August 1st, just 2 weeks before the final tragedy. The memo outlined a contingency plan in case the singer became physically incapable of performing the August tour. It did not mention medical intervention or hospitalization. Instead, it discussed the immediate activation of a $25 million insurance policy that covered the singer's accidental death or permanent disability. The memo explicitly noted that the insurance policy would pay out double the amount if the death occurred prior to the start of the tour, as the ticket refunds would be covered by a secondary underwriting firm. The corporate managers had calculated that a tragedy before the opening night in Portland was actually more profitable for their firm than a shortened, struggling tour. They had insured his life for a massive sum, and they were tracking his physical decline with mathematical precision. The housekeeper closed the metal box and locked it. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely fit the key back onto the ring. She returned the master keys to the butler's pantry just 5 minutes before the estate manager walked back through the rear door. She realized then that the man upstairs was not just an isolated star. He was an unwitting prisoner in a high-stakes financial trap, worth far more dead to his managers than he was alive. She went back to the kitchen and watched the security monitors on the wall. A new delivery truck had just arrived at the back gate. The driver was refusing to unload the boxes of medical supplies until he was handed an envelope containing $1,200 in cash. The estate manager walked out to the truck, grumbling, and pulled the cash directly from his own wallet. The mansion was running out of time, and the people in control were already preparing to collect the insurance money. Silent witnesses to the shattered kingdom. The kitchen staff gathered near the industrial dishwashers at 9 o'clock on the evening of August 14th. The heat in the room was intense, as the central air conditioning unit for the lower floor had malfunctioned earlier that morning. Nobody called a repairman. The estate manager had explicitly ordered that no outside technicians be allowed on the property until the tour caravan departed for Portland. The mansion was locked down tight, but the walls could not contain the sound of the final, catastrophic family meeting happening in the formal dining room. The housekeeper stood near the swinging door that connected the kitchen to the dining area. Through the small, diamond-shaped glass window, she could see the entire inner circle gathered around the long mahogany table. The singer was not there. His father, Vernon, sat at the head of the table, looking incredibly frail. His hands gripped the edge of the wood so tightly his knuckles were completely white. Across from him sat the lead corporate manager from California, flanked by 2 attorneys who had arrived on the afternoon flight from Los Angeles. The argument was about control of the upcoming tour merchandise. The housekeeper heard Vernon's voice rise to a pitch she had never heard before. He called the manager a thief. He stated plainly that he had seen the shipping logs from the warehouse in New Jersey, and he knew that half of the souvenir program profits were being funneled into a private corporate account. Vernon demanded that the contracts be voided immediately, or he would call the sheriff's department to remove the management team from the property. The corporate manager did not raise his voice. He did not get angry. He simply reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the table toward Vernon. The housekeeper watched through the glass as Vernon picked up the paper, read it, and instantly went pale. The anger left his face completely, replaced by a look of sheer terror. That paper was a copy of a personal loan agreement that Vernon had signed 3 years earlier with a Las Vegas casino group. The corporate management firm had quietly purchased that debt over the summer. They now owned Vernon's personal financial future. If he went to the authorities or tried to cancel the tour contracts, the firm had the legal right to foreclose on his personal property, including his home and his vehicles. They had completely neutralized the father's ability to protect his son. The attorneys then presented a new document for Vernon to sign. It was an amendment to the estate management contract, extending the California firm's exclusive control over the singer's likeness and merchandising rights for an additional 10 years in the event of the singer's incapacitation. Vernon stared at the pen in his hand for a long minute. The room was completely silent. He finally leaned forward and pressed his signature onto the page. The corporate manager smiled, gathered the papers, and placed them back into his briefcase. The meeting was over, and the inner circle had officially fractured into warring factions. The family members who worked on the property knew they were now completely powerless. The corporate handlers walked out of the dining room and straight to the security office near the back gate. Within 15 minutes, the gate guards received a new order. No member of the singer's extended family was to be allowed upstairs into the master suite under any circumstances, even if the singer requested them. The housekeeper returned to her duties, her heart pounding. She knew she had just witnessed the final surrender of the estate. She went up the back service stairs to check the linen closets on the second floor, desperate to see if she could get a message to the singer. As she reached the top landing, she saw one of the new corporate security guards standing outside the master bedroom door. He was holding a clipboard, tracking every single person who approached the suite. The singer's girlfriend came out of the bedroom, looking visibly distressed. She asked the guard for a glass of water and a pack of ice. The guard did not move. He told her to use the intercom to call the kitchen. The girlfriend looked at the guard with absolute disdain, calling him a prison warden. She slammed the door shut, and the heavy bolt clicked into place. The singer was completely isolated in his own room, a prisoner of the very contract his father had just been forced to extend. The logbook entries from that night track a sequence of events that the official history has completely ignored. At 11 o'clock, a courier arrived from a local pharmacy. He did not bring the standard prescription bottles that were regularly delivered to the house. He delivered a sealed, unmarked medical cooler directly to the corporate manager's office. The housekeeper watched the manager take the cooler upstairs himself. He did not knock on the front door of the suite. He used the side service entrance that bypassed the girlfriend's sightline. What happened inside that room during the next hour remains the most closely guarded secret of the entire estate. The housekeeper, hiding in the laundry alcove down the hall, heard the low murmur of voices. She heard the manager speaking in a firm, commanding tone, followed by the sound of glass breaking on the bathroom floor. A few minutes later, the manager walked back out into the hallway, carrying the empty medical cooler. He looked completely unbothered, adjusting his tie as he walked toward the elevator. The house grew completely still by 2 o'clock in the morning on August 15th. The heat inside the building was suffocating, making it impossible for the staff to sleep in their ground floor quarters. The housekeeper sat by the open window in the pantry, watching the backyard. She noticed a fire burning in the small brick incinerator near the back office. A security guard was standing by the flames, tossing handfuls of papers into the fire from a cardboard box. The housekeeper recognized the box. It was the exact same file container that held the daily gate logs from the previous month. The corporate team was systematically erasing the physical record of who had entered and exited the property during the singer's final weeks. They were cleaning the slate before the tour buses arrived. The final curtain and the cover-up. The white emergency vehicle arrived at the back entrance of the mansion at 2:30 in the afternoon on August 16th, 1977. There were no sirens. There were no flashing lights. The corporate managers had explicitly instructed the dispatch operator to send the vehicle on a low-priority basis to avoid alerting the local television news stations. The housekeeper stood in the main hallway, her fingers gripping a dust cloth, as the paramedics rushed past the formal mirrors and up the grand staircase. The confusion upstairs lasted for nearly 2 hours before any official call was made to the outside world. The housekeeper's secret logbook records a critical gap in time that the official estate timeline has never acknowledged. The singer was found unresponsive in the master bathroom at approximately 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Yet, the ambulance was not called until over an hour later. During those missing 80 minutes, the master suite was not a scene of medical emergency. It was a scene of corporate liquidation. The housekeeper watched through the crack of the service elevator door as 2 executive handlers carried 3 leather briefcases down to a waiting car in the alleyway. They were not salvaging medical equipment or personal belongings. They were removing the private contracts, the unrecorded financial ledgers, and the pre-signed rubber stamps from the desk drawer. The corporate team needed to ensure that when the local police and the medical examiner arrived, the room looked like the residence of an eccentric, wealthy artist, not a highly managed corporate compound. The unsigned legal documents regarding the upcoming tour were completely cleared out. The shredder in the lower executive office ran continuously for 45 minutes before the first police cruiser finally passed through the music gates. When the official announcement was made to the global press at 4 o'clock that afternoon, the narrative was already perfectly synchronized. The public was told the star had suffered a sudden, tragic medical event while preparing for his big return to the stage. The word heart failure was used repeatedly by the estate spokesman. The press conference took place in the front courtyard, under the shade of the large trees, while behind the closed curtains of the mansion, the domestic staff was being forced to sign immediate non-disclosure agreements. The corporate manager handled the staff signatures himself in the dining room. He did not offer condolences to the kitchen workers or the housekeepers who had worked there for decades. He placed a stack of legal forms on the table and informed the staff that their final severance checks would be withheld indefinitely if they spoke to a single reporter, a single police officer, or any extended family members. The housekeeper signed her name to the document, but she kept her small notebook tucked safely inside the lining of her uniform coat. The cover-up extended far beyond the walls of the mansion. The out-of-state neurological specialist, who had been arriving under the cover of darkness during the spring, completely vanished from the medical registry within 48 hours of the tragedy. The private clinic outside of Nashville, where the singer had been registered under an assumed name just 1 week prior, suffered a sudden and highly convenient electrical fire in its records room 3 days later. Every single chart, invoice, and registration log from the month of August was completely destroyed. The $25 million insurance policy that the managers had discussed in their secret August 1st memo was paid out in full by the end of the year. The underwriting firm conducted a brief, perfunctory review of the official medical report, which listed the cause of death as entirely natural. Because the tragedy occurred prior to the start of the tour, the secondary corporate entities collected double the expected payout, completely covering the costs of the ticket refunds while leaving a massive profit margin for the executive handlers. The hidden legal changes that Vernon had been forced to sign at the mahogany table on August 14th finally came to light during the probate court hearings the following spring. The amendment gave the California management firm absolute control over the singer's image, name, and music catalog for the next decade. The family tried to contest the validity of the contract, pointing out that Vernon had signed it under extreme financial duress, but the original loan agreements from the Las Vegas casino group were presented as evidence of a legitimate business arrangement. The corporate coup was complete, legal, and ironclad. The iron gates of the mansion were reopened to the public as a museum a few years later. Millions of fans walked through the lower rooms, admiring the gold records, the velvet furniture, and the glittering stage costumes. They looked up at the top of the stairs, which remained completely blocked off by a heavy wooden barrier. They were told the second floor was kept private out of respect for the family's wishes. They had no idea that the real history of the estate was not written in the music, but in the missing hours of a mid-August afternoon, preserved only in the pages of a hidden notebook that the managers spent decades trying to destroy. The secrets of Graceland remain locked behind that second-floor barrier, but the truth always finds a way into the light. What do you think really happened during those missing 80 minutes before the ambulance arrived? Was it a tragic medical event or a calculated